This video made possible by Killer Visual Strategies. Visit killervisualstrategies.com.
Thank you so much, and it's such a pleasure to be here, and I feel really fortunate to be able to join these awesome people on stage. Everyone's working on really great ideas for the future, and I wanted to just make one comment about that because I really believe that we're in the future right now, and we're looking to the past to figure out what we should do in the future. And so with that, I'm going to take my piece of paper, and we're going to work our way through some of the questions that we've all been contemplating. I'm going to start with Christie. So you say that you have about 12 years to mitigate the change that we need to make to assist our climate. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you're doing to make some of those changes in the food systems?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And this is an exciting panel because, as many of you know, recently the International Panel on Climate Change warned us that we now have just about 12 years to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change. And I say 12 years, but actually that was about a year ago, so now we're down to 11. One of the most effective things we can do is transition our society and our food industry to a more plant-based diet. And so that's what we do at Rebellyous Foods. We are working on making it possible to produce plant-based chicken products in a more automated and streamlined fashion than we are doing today. And so we're a production company, but we also design and implement new production methods for making plant-based chicken, so they're better products and they're scalable products. Because a lot of people don't realize that despite the fact that plant-based meat has been an excellent solution to mitigating climate change and helping people move towards a more plant-based diet, we produce over 105 billion pounds of animal meat in the US meat industry, and yet we only produce about 1/5 of 1% of that volume in plant-based meat. We're trying to address that.
So are you answering the question, which came first, the fake chicken or the fake egg?
I think what we're answering is specifically how do we address the true volume of the meat industry. Project Drawdown in San Francisco, which is an independent think tank, said that the fourth most important thing we need to do to address climate change is to reduce meat. But we have to do it on a large scale, and that's what we're trying to do at Rebellyous Foods, is essentially design the future of factory farmed or factory produced levels of plant-based chicken products to truly compete with chicken, production of chicken at the scales it is today.
So I bet you have a dream, maybe if you could replace one meal a week right now of someone not eating chicken and eating your product?
Yeah, so I mean, the goal for us is to make it available for as many days of the week as you would like.
Yeah.
You know, right now, most people, there is only enough plant-based meat, and that includes burgers and chicken nuggets and things like that made from plants, available for everybody in the United States to eat one meal a year. That's how little there is out there. So it's not like one meal a week is even possible to replace it with plant-based meat. Yeah. Now that doesn't mean we can't use other methods of replacing meat, but our goal is to be a scalable company so that it can effectively provide these products to people who, you know, have limited costs and limited access, and hopefully that limitation won't last very long as we continue to develop new industry, the new infrastructure for making plant-based meat.
Well, I'm a big fan of yours and excited to see how your business progresses. Having worked in the natural industry for many years, I see that there's a lot of great things going on.
Thank you.
So Tom, you're working with a lot of different restaurants here in the Seattle area, and sustainability and seafood and all the things that come together. Can you tell us a little bit about what your goals are and how you're working to change the way we eat?
Well, it's broad-based, as you can imagine. We do many different styles of restaurants, different foods. I would suggest right away, while there is not a substitute for the meat on your table, there is certainly a substitute for half of the meat on your table every night of the week, just by using and choosing a smaller size protein as the center of your plate. So that's a very simple solution that take 50% of the meat off the marketplace overnight if we just choose to eat less per meal. And I'm looking forward. I tried to order some of your chicken yesterday, I think it was, and we didn't quite make the connection because I didn't even know about it yet. So there's that. There's the sustainability angle, which is trying to utilize food systems that are certified sustainable. Part of that is, say, the Alaska salmon runs that I've been proactive about. There's a new movie out called The Wild. If you want to see an older version of that, called The Breach online, you'll learn about our sustainable Alaska resource. We've screwed it up down here across the board. Every salmon run down here is pretty much taxed out and gone, but we still have some opportunity in Alaska. So one of the things we're doing as a restaurant group is to celebrate that fishery and to help our customers understand that there's a way you can be proactive about it. So, for example, there's a big mine trying to be put in the headwaters of Bristol Bay. It's called Pebble Mine. You might see the stickers around Seattle with the slash through it. That is not a sustainable approach to seafood, right? It's a large, toxic copper and gold mine tailing ponds, 250 billion gallons, that are built on a fault line that have to be maintained in perpetuity, in history, forever. And they're telling us that it's safe, and we know it's not safe. And so those are the kind of things that we can fight as humans, that we should fight as humans, to help a sustainable run. We got 60 million sockeye salmon back out of that run last year, the biggest sustainable sockeye run in the world. And yet we want to treat it the same way that we treated the runs that we had previously down here. So we work in that area. And then customer education. We have our own farm, our own organic farm. We try to understand walking the talk of organic and sustainable, and our cooks spend time planting, weeding, picking, and then preserving that crop. And so they starting to understand that all the way through our 1,000 employees, that infrastructure of what it takes to be part of the change.
If someone wanted to learn about your systems, do you have like a stage or any internships or things that people could come and work with you on your farm and see what you're doing?
We don't right now. It's certainly not a bad idea. One of our young dishwashers really wants to be a farmer. He came out for 2 months and worked the farm. And sadly, he quit dishwashing and now is a farmer. You could easily do that if you were interested in that angle of it. We have a bunkhouse out there for our teams to stay in, and they can get up and work the farm anytime they want.
Let me know, because I have lots of students that I can connect with you. One of the things that I noticed about you is that you're really working with removing plastic from your restaurants. How have you done that?
Well, it's not hard in Seattle to get this message across. We live in a bubble in this town, and when I watched, I think it was Laura Ingraham the other night on Fox News, because I do like to understand what's going on out there, and watched her use straws purposely and everything else that people in Seattle are trying to eliminate from our world. It's just struck me what a bubble we live in this town. So how do we do it? It's easy. I called my dry cleaners the other day. Yes, I do have clothes. When it's sunny in Seattle, you have to wear shorts. That's all there is to it. But there's these little plastic, one-time use plastic clips holding my shirt together. And what do we have to say that we don't need these plastic clips? It's very simple stuff.
Yes.
And so I just think being conscious and figuring it out.
That's cool. So, Chris, Zume.
Yes, not the video conferencing Zoom.
Right.
I get that a lot.
Well, I didn't think it was, but I was interested when I looked on your website and I learned about your mobile kitchen work that you were doing and transitioning food into neighborhoods by having some kind of an interaction with moving the kitchen to a place that's located closer to the consumer. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, it's inspiring to hear you both talk about sustainability. You're right, 12 years, 11 now, probably less. What you're doing in the restaurants is phenomenal. I mean, we are facing incredible challenges globally around water utilization and security because of that. And our whole ethos of the company is really about sustainability, and the mobile kitchen's a part of that. So one of the problems is everybody is really cyclically starting to get an increased amount of home-delivered food. And that's fine, except it's all called last mile delivery and not really what it is, which is last 5 mile delivery. And our insight was, well, that's an awful lot of traveling around. There's a lot of waiting around. It's actually quite a wasteful process. So with mobile cloud kitchens, we said, well, what about if instead of having a fixed kitchen somewhere and a long trip to and from the customer, what if you put it on wheels? And that's what it is. It's a 26-foot stepper van with a full commercial kitchen in it, full services, everything from fire suppression, HVAC, 50 kilowatt generator, gray water, clean water. It's got everything. And cloud communications. So you take it, you can rack in any equipment you want. We can build out sort of whatever kitchen you need. And then it connects to our cooperative cloud system. That uses machine learning and prediction to be able to understand where to put that vehicle, your kitchen, to minimize the trip distance, to maximize the demand that you're going to get from your customers based on your food types. And by doing that, you reduce dwell time for the food, which is excellent. We also use prediction inside the kitchen to optimize food production flow, so again, minimizing dwell. You get shorter trips. We can do intelligent grouping, again, to reduce the amount of fuel that's being used to take those trips, make it actually margin sustainable, because now you're using the humans more effectively. And we also then, if you're in that system, we can use that demand prediction to do things like decrease your inventory waste by predicting what you need 2 weeks hence. We can also use intelligent order routing to burn down stock at the end of service so that you don't have as much waste left at the end of an evening. And you put it all together, you end up with a system that is part of how we see the bigger supply chain, but it really solves a lot of the problems people are having with bringing sort of food to consumers at distance. And then the last thing is, it's just time to market. I mean, Tom, I feel silly saying this on stage sitting next to you, but it takes a while, right? Like if you want to have a commercial restaurant or commercial kitchen, it's like 12 to 24 months. It's a very lengthy process, a lot of risk involved, leasing, et cetera. We view it as concept to kitchen in 2 weeks. We'll have done the permitting. We can rack in the equipment you want. We can even show you where to put in demand. And we'll do it with zero capital from you. We're a bit like AWS. I mean, Dave was up here before. We're like AWS in that you pay for what you use. So it's a fundamentally different approach to how you can produce food and get it to customers.
That's cool. So with the test that you did with the pizza mobile unit, did you have a special packaging box that you put your pizzas in? I was kind of wondering about that.
We did, and I will say I love pizza. I've been at your restaurants. Until I worked in this club, I never realized how hard pizza was. And we were talking beforehand. I thought dough was easy, and I'm such an idiot many times. My wife will validate this. And we found that we couldn't stabilize the pizza. We had no sugar in the crust. We weren't using any preservatives, and it just wasn't going well. Like corrugate wasn't cutting it. So we said, well, what other products are there? We found you could use molded fibers. You take bagasse, which is sugarcane waste, create a molded fiber product. If you get the slurry right, you can get the wicking right, so it doesn't get dry, it doesn't get damp. You can put geometry in to drain away grease, to circulate air. And we got this great pod system that allowed us to get a better product to the customer, and it's 100% compostable. And now, of course, turns out everybody wants one of these, so we have a huge amount of inbound demand of this solution for all sorts of food packaging, because you're turning waste into a beautiful product for food that's then compostable at the other end.
So I actually had somebody come visit me one time, and he was a designer from the Portland area, and he had this 3D printed clamshell, and it was edible so that you could put your hamburger in it. And I was looking at it and thinking, how would I eat that thing? I think it's hard to consume edible packaging. Have any of you had any success with edible packaging?
A hamburger bun.
Hamburger bun.
Yeah, I was just saying. By the way, isn't it weird? If you pick up the hamburger with your fingers, everybody thinks you're weird, but put bread around it, and bread's apparently okay to hold.
Yeah.
No, we kind of like the idea of putting it at the ground and just sort of giving it back to nature. I mean, you talk about plastic. There is, 300 million tons of plastic produced each year, and about 9% is recyclable.
Yeah.
And food plays a big part in that. We've got to get on that.
It's amazing what plastic has done to the world. But I often think, gosh, before we had plastic, what did we do? I mean, I think we've become very codependent on plastic myself. In the bathroom this morning, I was looking like every single thing in the bathroom was wrapped in a plastic sleeve, and I was thinking, wow, we've done this to ourselves. So I feel
we're afraid of germs for some reason.
Yeah, it's like,
they are the staff of life.
Right?
Yeah.
Don't wash your fruit, just eat it. Get those extra microbes. Speaking of microbes, they're using genomics now to actually be able to track exactly where bacteria come from. So for instance, if you ate a piece of sushi and you got food poisoning, they can actually take a culture from the restaurant and then track that bacteria all the way back to the country of origin. And so food safety has become a highlight in the food industry right now. We have the Food Safety Modernization Act that was instituted a few years ago, and it's being implemented now by manufacturing companies. And I think the trickle down to restaurants and food service purveyors would be that they would have requirements of supply chain to give certificate of analysis proving that the food is food safe and they followed all this protocol. For your implementation of what you all are doing, how do you handle food safety? I know this wasn't on my list of questions, but I started to think about it. As new people entering the food industry, we need to have an idea about how we keep people from being sick. And that's what food science is really about. And I'm wondering, what are some of the food science things that you do in your projects that you're working on? Do any of you want to comment?
Yeah, I can start with that one. I mean, I think actually your question speaks to a common theme through all three of us, which is that to make the food system better, we have to actually focus on the system.
Yes.
You know, whether it be bringing food to where it's available to people, or making restaurants such that they're using the resources around them, or replacing rather than expecting people to necessarily change their entire diet. And where I think that comes into the food safety aspect of it is that I think by doing revamping of systems, rather than necessarily always expecting the world to just change to our whim or change to the whim of the needs regarding climate change, is that we're giving them, like, you know, better options, more accessible options, obviously more ecological options. And with that comes the added benefit of food safety. So for example, for us, we use FSMA as well, the Food Safety Modernization Act, new preventative controls methodology in our food manufacturing plant in West Seattle. And in doing so, and in talking to future, you know, places where we would like to expand our operations, one of the things we can do is say, you know, we realize that you have a facility out in Arkansas, in Georgia, out in Atlanta, places where there's processing of chicken right now, where we can go in and say, hey, we would love to offer our new technology that offers a food safer opportunity, a worker safety opportunity to transform some of the production facilities where we're processing animal-based chicken, real animal chicken, and do that in a plant-based way. And where, again, this comes to food safety is because, you know, chicken is unfortunately a very dangerous raw meat.
Yeah, salmonella.
Exactly. And a variety of other issues.
Yes.
And so by designing a system that can be effectively deployed out into the world to making plant-based foods, we're addressing all of those issues, sociological issues, food safety issues, and the opportunity to deploy it largely. And so from a food safety perspective, I think that, you know, it's a win-win-win-win situation in so many of these things that we're talking about, because we're trying to not just address one human harm, we're addressing many of these human harms, including food safety issues.
I really love the idea of going into, if you're in the vegetarian market, trying to replace some of the meat products, going into the manufacturing systems that are already in place and implementing plant-based foods. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's our goal, and that's what we do. We design new production systems and automated production facilities that can one day just take an old chicken processing plant and turn it into a new plant-based chicken nugget processing plant.
Wow, that's great and exciting. So Tom, can you tell us about the Impossible Burger?
Sure.
I know you have it in some of your restaurants, and it's all the rage. It's in Burger King right now, and they say it's available nationwide. And I'm just wondering, Do people do they eat it once and then they come back again? Or is it just a one-time thing where people are like, I just got to try this Impossible Burger, and then what happens?
Well, right now we feel like it's about 50% of number 2, which is I just have to try it.
Yeah.
And then about 50% of those people are coming back for it. And as it gets out there in the world more at Burger King and places like that, we're absolute acceptance. It is about 40% of our sales now for hamburgers.
Wow.
Is the Impossible Burger. 10% of that is Impossible Burger with bacon and cheese.
Do you fry them? Because I was
We
thinking,
sear them.
if you put them in the deep fryer, which we were talking about eliminating the deep fryer, I always thought veggie burgers taste better deep fried.
Yeah.
With cheese and bacon, for sure.
Well, when you get back to are you eating this for your health, then I would suggest that's probably not the best angle. But like I said, 10% of them are with bacon, because what we're finding in the restaurants and in society is that people are eating vegetarian not because they're vegetarian, because that's what they feel like tonight. They don't care whether it's meat or they care, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, it's just an option for tonight. I'm going to try the Impossible Burger or whatever. It's not necessarily because it's vegetarian. Mm-hmm. And so that's we're finding that tremendously. The struggle we have is that for right now I can buy a delicious ground beef product that we grind ourselves for about $3 a pound, $3.50 a pound, and the Impossible Burger to us is $11.90 a pound, and so both 100% utilization. So it's really apples to apples. So it's 3 times the price, right? So almost 4 times the price. That's a struggle, because it's hard to justify that on a menu. Here's the burger at $15. Here's the Impossible Burger at $20.
I know, and then if you want a gluten-free bun, and that's $3 more, so your burger
you're officially a pain in the ass at that point.
Exactly.
No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, hey, I turned to gluten-free like 12 years ago, and that's like one of my funnest things I do when I go to a restaurant. I ask, do you have a gluten-free option? And that's how I know, like, if the staff is kind of progressive and thinking about the consumers.
Yeah.
So
it's about 20% of our sales right now is gluten-free.
Yeah.
Including at our bakery, and not gluten-free in the celiac way where it cannot possibly be contaminated, but gluten-free oftentimes by choice, just like the vegetarian burger.
Yeah.
And then the other way that we are seeing it is the mixing of vegetable and protein. So in our restaurants, like staff meal-wise, we have meat-free Mondays, but the James Beard Foundation has promoted across the country like a 20% mushroom to 80% burger as a way to start to wean us off of red meat. So.
Yes, actually, we have a grant down in Oregon that's coming up here this fall where we're going to be formulating burgers, maybe vegetarian, but possibly with meat that contain mushrooms in them. Yeah, there's a big push for that right now. And there's a product actually currently available in Montana that they sell into the school food systems that's 50%, or actually 51% vegetables, and it has a high percentage of lentils in it. Mm-hmm. So Montana's pretty progressive in making the change for their consumers.
It's kind of crazy, isn't it? It's like soda and water. If you want a soda, it's like $1.50. You want water, it's like $2.95 to leave out all the stuff they put into soda. And it's like, if you've got a cow...
But you get a convenient plastic carrier with it.
You do, but it's like cows. They don't have a convenient plastic carrier, but they do... they take all this energy and water to make a cow, but if you don't want to use all of that, you want to use vegetables, it's a lot more expensive for some reason. Yeah.
Well, you know, also when it comes to just one follow-up, I was being silly on that question, but I will say that you'll find restaurants today making so much more effort than ever before to accommodate special dietary needs, because there's things like this coming along that are compete for your dollar, where we just can't be in your neighborhood, in your kitchen at that moment, right? So it's you'll see restaurants being much more progressive that way.
Yeah, so the federal government enacted the allergen requirements quite a few years ago, and there are actually 8 allergens that are considered allergens in our food system. I think probably everyone knows what they are, but it's dairy, nuts, soy, wheat, shellfish, fish, peanuts, and tree nuts. Mm-hmm. And sometimes as we're eating, we don't even know that we have an allergy. So once we eat something that we're allergic to, we might not feel good. It actually takes a long time for our body to get that allergen out of our system. And so I feel like right now is the time to really look at food and figure out what you can eat that makes you feel good. and change the way you eat and be more conscious of the foods that you're buying and purchasing and putting into your mouth, because the biggest trend that I'm seeing is that food is medicine. And we're changing our health by changing the way that we eat. So Chris, I'm wondering, you were talking to us a little bit about growing up on the farm.
Yeah.
And I feel like some of what you're doing now is actually motivated by what you learned as a kid. And I'm wondering if there's like any big sort of takeaway that you could give us. Tell somebody, like, if you have a gut feeling about something that you thought when you were a kid, like, how can you innovate on that and like create something?
First big rule, better to become a software engineer than work on a pig farm. When you talk about like raw meat being dangerous, really raw pigs are very dangerous. They're quite fast. Here's what I learned. I didn't realize this, but I grew up in southwest of England like we were talking about, and we ate farm to table because that was just what you did when you grew up on a farm. And we couldn't really afford all the center aisle packaged goods, and so you ended up eating incredibly healthily because you had produce that was designed for basically human consumption versus produce that's designed for the food supply chain, which is very long. And why are tomatoes thick-skinned with no nutrients? Well, because they're meant to be stacked on each other for 6 months at a time. So one of the things that I think I learned that came back to me at Zume is, well, what if you could create that same short supply chain? And our supply chain was like the chickens are at the end of the garden and you just go get the eggs. But now you've got these massive supply chains. So what we're doing is we try to balance supply and demand, right? That's what our company does at the core. So if you could take prediction from municipal signals, so think about people eating in restaurants, people eating in mobile kitchens, people, just all the food signals, there's no reason why you can't predict what needs to be grown from a produce perspective. And there are many technologies to grow that as a just-in-time function, and to grow it like off the grid, mass hydroponic, that you don't have to farm in the normal way. Then if you know where it has to go, who wants it, and what form they want it, you can shorten supply chain. The kind of thing that farm-to-table restaurants do, you could do on a mass scale if you just had all the data from across the supply chain, we're using it together, and a willingness to apply those predictions, those optimizations to each part together as a system. We talked, sort of mentioned that earlier in the talk, the system. That's what we think, and that's what I draw inspiration from. It's like, I feel I've been very lucky with how I grew up and had really good health because of that, or I think it's because of that. That and the gin. So what happens if you could do it at scale and you could remove the waste from the supply chain, and in doing that, get more nutritious, healthier produce to people because you've just really shortened this whole loop, using the supply chain as a system, not as individual silos designed as profit centers. And so that's, I think, what I learned growing up is what we take as impetus as a company now.
That's really great. I'm wondering,
All except the gym part.
Yeah, a little bit about the nexus between like the geek-wired people, because I'm totally out of my element here. I don't know much about technology except that I have an iPhone 10 and I know like how to use my computer and all that stuff. But what's interesting to me is like, how can we get out of our silos and work together to move foods into the future? I think that's really something to contemplate, and I don't think the answer is going to come really quickly. There might be someone here who's going to wake up tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. and be totally energized and have a new idea that they can implement, but I feel like just the thought of having food here at this conference is super powerful. We have so much innovation going on in the food industry, and I think a lot of it happens behind closed doors. And one of the things that I always struggle with is trying to have everything be transparent and making sure that people understand what they need to know to be successful, to move into a different category that they're not necessarily trained in. And I think that all three of you are doing that already. It's really cool. Is there any like big story that you'd like to share today about something that you're innovating on and that you see that we can do for the future of food that we may not have touched on yet this morning?
Well, I'm happy to take a crack at that.
Okay.
So I think, it is really interesting that we are talking about food here at a GeekWire Summit, and GeekWire not only being a Seattle favorite, but also well read around the world for understanding technology. And from the perspective of food, I think we all have an interesting, different point about technology. From our perspective, from the Rebellyous Foods perspective, where the technology comes in is trying to understand and trying to develop the infrastructure for making plant-based chicken products at a large scale. So if you think back to the 1950s, the early 1940s, or the 1940s, 1950s, when there was a call for a chicken in every pot, a lot of our engineering effort at that time went into mechanizing, automating, industrializing the production of meat. And that's why we have factory farmed chicken, beef, chicken, particularly chicken. A lot of beef is still on like CAFOs and things like that. But it is fundamentally the reason that we, a planet of 7.5 billion people, are possible to be able to produce over 9 billion chickens in the United States every single year. Unless everybody here is killing chickens, it would not be possible otherwise unless we had mechanized and automated it.
Yes.
So to be fundamentally to replace that, for all the reasons we're talking about, human health, animal welfare, climate change, we have to do that same mechanization for plant-based meat. I mean, we've already discussed how the Impossible Burger is almost 4 times, I couldn't quite remember the number, about 3 times the cost of beef. And part of that is the fact that we're still producing it in relatively low volumes, and we produce it on equipment that is actually really just made for beef. And so that's what we do at Rebellyous Foods. We actually design new production equipment so that we're not trying to just take plant-based proteins and manufacture them into products in the same way that we're trying to take chicken and manufacture it, because they're completely different materials. And anybody who's ever dealt with a manufacturing problem knows that the material itself defines the manufacturing. And so that fundamentally, I think, is why we're talking about food here, is because there's a technology aspect to this transition. And we all have different approaches, obviously, but that's just an explanation of kind of our approach, is that it's a manufacturing technology issue.
Yes, yes. And what about you?
I'm still somewhat decidedly low tech when it comes to using tech in the food theater, which is one of the things I stress at my cooking school all the time is, download the apps, right? The Monterey Bay Seafood Watch app, right? And stop pretending and putting your head under the pillow when you're in the seafood aisle at the grocery store and saying, I forget which shrimp are sustainably raised or sustainably caught, or there's no excuses anymore, right, for that type of behavior. You just pull up the app, boom, you can tell that Thai shrimp is ruining the mangrove forest of the area, or you can tell what's wild caught, what you should be buying, what you shouldn't be buying. And then use some common sense. Like for me, if you're looking at an indigenous tribe or indigenous people that live off of the land, don't screw it up for them. So going back to my Pebble Mine things, like those people need to feed their children, they need to put them through schools, they need to make a living. And so this fishery is a way for them to make a living. And if you don't let them do that sustainably, then they're going to choose mining instead, which is not good for them and good for us as humans. And so those are the kind of things that you can read about, use your low technology about, watch it on your iPad, whatever it is that you need to do to be involved.
I feel like you're sort of like a grassroots leader in this area, and people really admire you for the work that you're doing. So keep up
it's important stuff.
Yeah, it is
and,
super important.
If you're not going to stand up, then just get the heck out of the way.
Yeah, it's really nice. What about you, Chris?
Like we don't have a food system on the planet that can feed the population that's going to be here in 2050. We have a third of the people of the world don't have enough nutrients, and yet we throw away 30% pre and post consumption of food. We have 10 cities in Australia that are less than 12 months away from 0 day when they don't have water, and yet if you were to stop rice farming in Australia for 12 days, you could give everybody another year. I'm not saying you should stop rice farming, I'm saying there's broken pieces of the whole system. I think it was a really interesting thing you said, Christie, around the effort that got put into factory farming. We need to put the same effort into the food supply chain, but we need to do it with the look at reducing waste, improving sustainability, reducing water utilization, reducing plastic, We need to do all those things. I mean, one of our contributions, we said we're going to take 1 billion pieces of plastic out of the food supply chain next year, by the end of next year. That's just the start. We're going to keep upping that number.
Yeah.
But we all have to think at the scale of like, what can we do and what energy can we put into fundamentally changing how we grow, what we grow, how we transport it, how we prepare it, how it gets to consumers. Because there's lots of great advancements in like genetically tailored foods to help prevent lay symptoms or even cure diseases, and that's fantastic. But that's sort of like taking the people at 80% of food health and moving them to 85.
Are we done?
We need to take the population up from like 20% up to that 80%, and the only way we do it is going to be by balancing supply and demand and getting the right foods to a very broad set of people. And that's what I think we all have to put energy into.
Yeah. So I know that we all could talk for several hours about this interesting subject, but we're standing between lunch and everything else going on here.
A dangerous place.
We have to call it quits. And I want to thank you all for coming and visiting with me today. And I hope that we'll be able to connect outside of this event. And I would love to work on anything that you're interested in the food realm, because that's what we do at our facility down in Portland, is innovation. So
Well, thank you
very much.
Thank you.